to get everyone to JFK, our flights, because as a film crew, you got lots of equipment. And we always try and arrive 3 hours early because, check everything in and all that kind of stuff. So we arrived 3 hours early to JFK, and we're looking for our flight on the board. And I'm like, I don't see the flight. What the hell is going on? Internally panicking, obviously, because it's my responsibility to get everyone to the right place at the right time. And looking at the flight, and I go and ask someone, it's like, where is this flight? So that flight doesn't fly from here. It flies from, I think it was Newark or LaGuardia, essentially one of the other airports. And I was just like, that feeling when your stomach just like goes, oh my God, like I have screwed up majorly here. Like this is not good. And I sort of had to sort of go to the crew like, hey guys, so we're in the wrong airport. Just to let you know, we're in the wrong airport.
Welcome to the Where Have You Been podcast. I'm your host, Bill Ream, and each week on the pod, I have conversations with incredible guests from all walks of life. Expect to hear funny, crazy, emotional, life-changing, and even sometimes life-threatening stories and experiences that will entertain and inspire you. As always, I appreciate your likes, subscriptions, ratings, and reviews wherever you are listening. It doesn't sound like much, but it truly helps the pod get to the ears of more people who may enjoy it. And check out the website, whybpodcast.com, for links to the socials where you can find pictures from the guests and their stories, and also buy merch if you're so inclined. Now let's get to this week's episode. Thank you for being here. Welcome back for another episode of the Where Have You Been podcast. You know me, I'm your host, Bill Ream. And I've said it about 55 times so far. I've got a fantastic guest along with us for this episode this week. And as always, I will let them introduce themselves. I actually have a documentary filmmaker and fellow podcaster on the episode this week. I have Chris on the show. And if you would be so kind, Chris, would you tell the listeners or listener, whatever we have this week, who are you?
Hey, Bill, thank you so much for having me on the show. I say my name's Chris, and I am a documentary director. I make a lot of documentaries for channels like Nat Geo, BBC, Discovery Channel, Smithsonian, focusing mainly on science documentaries, natural history, adventure, that kind of stuff. And yeah, I've been to loads of weird and wonderful places, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Fantastic. So first of all, you also have your own podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So alongside my documentary work, I also have a podcast called No Ordinary Monday. And this is basically a show where, kind of similar to yours in some ways, where I bring on a new guest each week. But the idea is that they each bring an extraordinary story from something they've done at work. So it could be a Secret Service agent, it could be a firefighter, it could be a pilot that crash landed in the Atlantic Ocean. It could be, any one of these incredible careers that that people have. And this all came from my job, essentially. So, for the last 15 years or so, I've been going around the world filming with everyone from NASA astronauts to, neuroscientists to, cave explorers. And what I'd found is that we'd sit down for the interview, for the shoot or whatever, and we'd talk about caves or space or whatever. But then after the shoot, we'd go for like a burger and a beer, after we wrapped everything, and we just, chat as you do. And I'd found these people had such incredible stories, from their careers that none of them we had time to really get into during the documentary filming. And so for years I've been thinking like, oh, is there a way I can get these stories out there? And so I came up with No Ordinary Monday. And so I started with as we all do as podcasts, you start with the low hanging fruit, the people that in your inner circle, and again, like I've got cave scientists and adventure cameramen. I've got, death anthropologists and people that have all these, interesting careers and amazing stories to go with them. And now I'm sort of, now I'm 6 months in, sort of branching out and finding new guests and, everything from like dominatrixes to, I don't know, roller coaster designers and basically they come on the show, they give us a little backstory about what they do, but essentially the show is structured around like one main feature story, and it's basically what is the biggest, baddest, most incredible story of your entire career, and they come on and relive it for us.
I love what you said about how you wanted to make sure, like, if you could find some way to bring these stories out into the world. kindred spirits, I think in some ways we are, because
Yeah,
that was sort of how this happened with me, although it's with travels specifically. But I would, be having conversations with people and having these stories that they're exciting me, like they're bringing back memories in myself. They're making me feel things, and we're hopefully doing that for each other. And like you said, kind of we talk for an hour just sharing these stories. And I was like, man, this would stink if these stories kind of went to rest with these people. I think they should be shared with the world, and that's kind of how this started. So very, very cool.
absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
there's also like a secondary reason that I started the show, which is basically like, I was at, school like 16, 17 years old. And I remember a pretty distinct conversation with my careers advisor at school. And I sat down and, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old. And they said, well, okay, what subjects do you like at school? And I said, well, I love sports, I love PE, and I love science. And they said, oh, well, you can go and do sports science for a career. And that was kind of like in a nutshell what their advice. And I was kind of like, okay. And long story short, obviously I didn't go and do sports science at the end of the day, but I ultimately felt a frustration with like the lack of, and this is, I think it's a ubiquitous thing with a lot of people in school, and not even just school, but after school, like guidance and direction on what different jobs are like in reality and how many jobs there are out there for people to do and how many careers people can pursue and find joy in. And that was always a fear for me, is finding a career that I could do for the rest of my life and enjoy it. And it's not an easy thing. And so as I said, the secondary purpose of the show is to try and provide like a helpful resource for people who may be 17, or they could be like 37 and in a career they don't enjoy. It'd be like, I've always wanted to be a pilot, or I've always wanted to be a firefighter, or I've always wanted to be this or that. And providing sort of a place where people can really get a behind the scenes view of particular jobs and really get a sense of what is it like to do these things. And so, yeah, that's kind of hopefully another thing about the podcast that people can get out of it.
That's fascinating. I don't mean this to be a stupid question, I really don't, but was that a conscious decision when you started it, or did you kind of, as you were going into it, going, you know what, this is also like a really good resource for people, or did you planned that going in?
It was interesting. Like, I had the idea, as I said, from all these stories I'd collected, over my years, just meeting interesting people. But when I was developing the show, I was kind of like, as we all do, is like, what is the format? How's this going to work? Is this more like a careers advice show? Is it more like a, entertaining, storytelling interview podcast? And I lent into the latter, obviously, just because I thought, it'd be much more interesting for people rather than just a pure careers advice kind of podcast. But I thought that careers advice could kind of be, as I said, like a secondary subtext to the whole thing, and provide that for people either subliminally or in a way that might be entertaining as well.
I mean, honestly, I hadn't even thought of it that way. I had thought of it as an entertaining show, but, especially if you're putting people's socials out there, if somebody's listening and they find something very interesting, they have a contact now. They don't even have to do the work, the work's done for them to.
And we've got a really good, like a Facebook community group where I try and encourage all the guests to join the group, in case people want to go on there and sort of find one of the guests that they've gone before and ask a question on there. And, the guest would answer any questions or whatever. Or if they're not in the group, someone can email me through the website or whatever and be like, hey, I'd love to be, this. I had an interview with a parapsychologist, who does like ghost hunting and stuff. I would love to do this as a career or get into it more. Like, how would I do that? And I could put them in touch with, the guest and stuff. So again, it's kind of hopefully building a community and a resource for people to find jobs they really love doing.
It's awesome, man. I'm really excited for you. I'm really excited for what you're doing. And I hope that things continue to grow and build for you. Before I go back to your main career, because I feel like when I kind of skipped over that, I didn't mean to. But can you just let everyone know where they can find you, the website, any socials that you have?
Yeah, sure. So the website is noordinarymonday.com. And you could find tons of links on there to the show and to the socials and everything. But we're also on Facebook, No Ordinary Monday Podcast, and on Instagram at No Ordinary Monday Podcast. And we're also on like LinkedIn and a few places as well. But sort of Facebook and Instagram is really mainly where we're at. So, and then if you want to drop me an email, you can also drop me an email at hello, HELLO, at noordinarymonday.com as well. And happy to hear from anyone if they got any questions.
Or if they want to be a guest on the show. right?
or exactly, absolutely. If, I'm always looking for new guests, as we all are podcasters. And if you've got great stories and you've got a cool career, it doesn't even need to be a particularly cool career. As I said, like I've had people on who don't have like rock star careers or whatever. They've just got great stories, and I'd love to hear from those people as well. So yeah, feel free to reach out.
Very nice. Very nice. So you had mentioned that you've been doing documentary filmmaking for, did you say 15 years?
Yeah, about 15 years.
And how did that start for you? Just out of curiosity, my own curiosity.
Yeah. So I actually kind of going off what we said earlier about me, getting careers advice at school. I did love science and I did love sports. But I kind of chose the sort of the science aspect of it to go into university. I did sort of a forensic biology degree, so a little bit of criminology and stuff at university. It didn't really satisfy me. I kind of enjoyed the science aspect of it, the crime science. I think at this time, like, I don't know if guests remember CSI. Sorry, if your audience remembers a show called CSI, probably back in the sort of 2000s. It was like a crime scene investigation show.
Yeah, I
Everyone's
don't
all
know
about
about where
that.
you are because and the listeners don't know this, but you said good morning to me while I'm almost ready for bed.
Yeah.
We're not in the same country, but here in the U.S., you any time of day or night, you will find
Yep.
an episode of CSI rerunning here.
Yeah. I can imagine. It was a great show. And at the time, I was like, oh, that's really cool. And that obviously influenced, like, I'm going to do that as a job. But then there are realities. There's the TV world and the realities. And the realities for me, I just wasn't, it just didn't, it was kind of a lot of lab work and putting stuff into machines, taking a little bit of blood spot from a piece of clothing, putting it into a robot, getting some DNA out, standing up in court, presenting the evidence. And for a lot of people, that's kind of, they love it. But I didn't find the joy in it. And so I ended up doing a master's of research in molecular microbiology because I wanted to sort of do more of the research side of like asking questions and trying to find answers and, really pushing the boundaries of science and sort of being a little bit more like problem solving, creative and trying to find those things. At this time, like documentary filmmaking was nowhere near on the radar for me. Like I was like, I'm going to do a career in science, I'm going to do a PhD and all that kind of stuff. And I ended up basically trying to get PhDs, but the more I looked around, the more I was like, I don't know if I want to spend the next 4 years of my life really honed in on a very small area of science. Like I love all of science. I love chemistry and biology and physics. And so I kind of put the PhD search to one side and I was like, I need work for the time being. And I basically got a job in scientific sales, which is selling consumables to labs because it was still kind of in the scientific realm. And I thought in the back of my mind, I get to speak to a lot of professors in labs and maybe I'll find the sort of dream PhD that I'll be looking for. And kind of I did 9 months of that job. And for anyone in sales, like, you'll probably know that every quarter you have like a big sales meeting, everyone comes together and books out, the conference room of the ballroom of the Hilton or whatever, and there's like 1,000 people, and there's like graphs and spreadsheets on the wall, and everyone's saying how well they've done and how much money they've made. And for me, that didn't excite me. The amount of money that was being made, I wasn't driven by money, and I kind of had like a moment that at that sort of third quarter sales meeting where I'd gone back to my hotel room, sat on the edge of my bed, and I sort of said to myself, I cannot do this for the next 40, 45 years or 30, 40 years of my life or whatever it is. I need to find something that really sort of excites me. And I sort of sat there on my bed and I sort of got onto Google and I broke it down again. It's like, what do I love doing? What do I really love doing? And I still loved the science aspect. And the other thing I loved was photography. And I just started Googling, what jobs can you do, if you like science and photography. And an advert for an internship at the BBC in Glasgow, where I was living at the time in Glasgow, Scotland. And an advert for the internship at the BBC came up in their science department. So it was like science documentaries. I'd never thought of that before. And so I basically, I put together a quick, application, threw in my CV along with it that night and went to bed and sort of thought, let's see what happens. Anything comes of that, whatever. I think early the next week they replied saying, "Hey Chris, we like your application. Can you start in like 1st of October?" And this was like, September or whatever.
Oh
And I was
wow.
like, "Oh, wow, okay." Because usually interns, they're pretty available, but I had a full-time job. So I had to go to my boss and be like, "Can I take 4 weeks unpaid leave and then maybe come back and maybe not?"
Sure that
And
went
he
over
was
well.
obviously like, yeah, he was like, yeah, okay, what's the internship for? Is it for something in this industry? I went, no, it's for, this thing. He said, well, clearly, like, you're having doubts about this career and all this kind of stuff. And, he'd kind of like said, okay, why don't you think about it for a couple of days? And kind of came back a couple of days later. And in that time, he'd worked out, like, I'd done relatively well in my sales targets and stuff. And he said, okay, here, let me lay out some options for you. If you quit your job, you're going to be leaving before your first year, probation's up and you forfeit your bonus. And I calculated your bonus if you stay till the end of the year, it's about £33,000 on top of your salary. And I was like, what? That's a lot of money for like a 24-year-old. And I was like, okay, that's yeah, okay, I can that. And then I kind of like went home that night and I thought about it. And I was like, if I did that, I might get the money and I'd have to, say no to the internship and then maybe not get it again. That opportunity may have, completely be closed off to me. And I thought about it that night and it was a really easy answer. I kind of thought, this check they're dangling, which for a lot of people they would love it. It's great, but it didn't motivate me. And I thought that's going to be the rest of my career. They're going to be dangling check after check, and I just keep doing it. And so I quit. I quit and basically went to the BBC. And I remember walking into the BBC on day one and just being like, "This is the coolest day of my life."
So awesome.
Walking into this like incredible building, and this is the BBC in Glasgow, which for anyone that wants to Google it is a very cool building. And walking in there and just seeing like getting that first day orientation by the building manager and whatever, and getting to walk through the backstage of the all the studios, getting to see all the different teams, the news desk, the radio team, the factual and documentaries team, like everybody, and you're just walking through these areas and knowing, oh, this is the BBC, this is really cool. And so for those 4 weeks, it was basically like they get you to do everything, from, a little bit of, basically what my first job that day was logging footage, which now is a relatively boring task for anyone. But for me then it was incredible, which is basically, when you come back from a shoot, you've got tons of footage, hours and hours of footage, and someone has to sit down and log each and every clip for the editors and the producers and the directors. And that literally means you're sitting in front of a computer watching the clip and go, okay, great. This is the, take whatever from the presenter walking in this area. They fluffed the script that they were saying. So, it's a duff take. This is a good take. This is a bad take, and going through every single clip. And it's a laborious task, but for me, getting to see all the behind the scenes where, they're setting up shots and this kind of all the stuff that editors cut out, it was so cool. And then after that, I got to sit on development meetings where they're coming up with new ideas. And then, I think on the third week I was there, I was on a BBC Four program, and BBC Four is kind of I guess, more niche in science and history documentaries and lower budget kind of stuff, but still really, really high, really, really good content. And we were making a documentary about the history of botany, which is super niche. And we went, and I was invited to go out on a shoot just to help out, production assistant kind of thing, or a runner, as we call it in the UK. And I just remember like the particular scene the director devised was some, I think, Russian or Ukrainian, Soviet scientist who was looking at genetics, I think back in the, I can't remember, 60s or 70s. Oh no, earlier than that. Yeah, it would be like, yeah, early 1900s, I think. Anyway, so this guy was doing a lot of work that the Soviets didn't want him doing, and the KGB had sort of abducted this guy and sort of put him in a gulag and stuff. So what the director had devised was he'd found this really beautiful road in Scotland somewhere. We'd gone out there, hired like a Rolls Royce Phantom car and a driver. And the presenter was going to be walking up that big, like, hill in Scotland. That road was like trees and pine trees everywhere. And as he's sort of doing his piece to camera or, presenting to the camera, this car would drive up behind him, very slowly. And then as he finishes piece to camera, two sort of quote unquote KGB officers, me and the assistant producer, would jump out and throw him in the back of the car, and then we drive off and kind of stuff. And So I got, my little costume on and the KGB trench coat and a hat. And the whole time I'm thinking, this is crazy. Like people get paid for this. This is the most fun I've ever had. And we did it. I was just like, this is incredible. And so after that, I was, completely, hooked and enamored with this job, and it kind of went from there.
That is so incredible. And you mentioned there's so many other outlets that you've worked with or worked for. You're independent, right? You're an independent director. You don't work for anyone specifically.
Yeah, it's kind of in this industry, it's hard to get staff jobs in particular places. And I don't know if the listeners know, but the way kind of the industry works essentially is that National Geographic or Discovery or BBC, they don't, I mean, the BBC is different. They do have their own in-house team, but a lot of the big channels don't have their own in-house teams. They get production companies, which there are many, many around the world that hire crews that make documentaries, and those production companies will, come up with ideas and pitch them to the channels, and the channels will go, great, we love it. Here's the budget to go make it. So yeah, I'm a freelancer, and I've worked with a number of different production companies across my career, mostly in Scotland and England and London and Singapore. And yeah, so I kind of go where the work is essentially.
Makes sense. Makes total sense. Do you have, I suppose you'd probably be on IMDb.
Yeah, people can find me on IMDb and see what I've been up to. I think it's pretty up to date. I think I'm just actually IMDbing myself if that's a thing.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, because there are a number of Chris Barons, and I want to see which one I am. Yeah, you can. Just I'm the first one. That's great.
Excellent.
So yeah, I'm actually when it because there's different. If you're multiple names, they put a little number next to you. So I'm Chris Barron 6. VI, the Roman numeral. So, but yeah, so it's got all my credits on there, and yeah, so people can find out what I've been up to. And they can also, I've got a personal website as well called frontierfilms.tv, and they can also see what I've been up to in there, which has a bunch of, clips and trailers of shoots that I've done and things I've been up to as well, which might be a little bit more comprehensive than IMDb, but yeah.
Very, very excellent. I'm going to try to remember to link that in the show notes as well, because it's all interesting to me, and I think it'd be cool to check out some of the stuff that you've been involved in.
Yeah.
But kind of shifting gears, all of that is very fascinating, and I could talk to you all day about that. Maybe I should have you as a guest on your own show. I don't know how that would work. But shifting gears a little bit, I guess. So getting into doing the documentary filmmaking and things like that, is that kind of what drew you into travel, or was travel like a part of your life when you were younger? Did your family travel? How did that all work for you?
I think I was speaking to my mum about this the other day. I got on my first international flight, I think, when I was 6 months old. I don't even remember it. My family's always been, my dad's in the energy business. So, we've always been moving around as a family. My dad's Scottish, born and bred in Edinburgh, and my mum's from Australia. She's from Adelaide. But my mum and dad met when he was working in Perth, Australia. I was born in Perth, Australia. But very quickly, I think when I was, I think they'd moved when I was 18 months old to Dubai. And this was in the sort of 80s, late 80s, which I don't think I have any memory of because I was so young. And then they moved again when I was maybe 4 or 5 to Houston, Texas. And that was, that's kind of where I did my elementary school and sort of kind of growing up. And that's where my memories started forming. And I, had a Texan accent growing up, like all the home videos that my parents have got are me in cowboy boots, snakeskin cowboy boots with a Texan accent roaming around. And obviously I don't have that anymore. My accent's somewhat sort of strange with a Scottish lilt. I'm not sure what your listeners can hear, but yeah, it's a bit of an odd accent. And then when I was maybe 11, we'd moved back to Dubai, where I sort of, again, had to transition from the American system to the British system of school. And then from about 11 till 15, I was in Dubai. And then my parents sort of sent me to boarding school in Scotland for a couple of years to finish off my school in Scotland. And yeah, so I'd kind of then we're in Scotland where I kind of, finished my university and started my career and stuff. But all the way through that, we were very fortunate, as a lot of middle class folks might be, that we got to do some holidays, in and around those places. And moving from, Australia, Dubai, the States, you kind of holiday regionally to some degree, and it was such a great opportunity to see some of these places. We're in Dubai. I remember going when I was quite young to places like Egypt, going when I was very young again, skiing in New Mexico and Albuquerque and Angel Fire. Those are my really early memories of travel. We did a really memorable RV trip from Texas all the way up, for 2 weeks up into all the national parks like Yellowstone and Yosemite and places like that. Yeah, like so many weird and wonderful and cool places that we got to go to, in that time that we were traveling for holidays even. But it kind of went exponential when I kind of got into filmmaking, just because of the places that we got sent to for that as well. So yeah, I don't know where you want to start with the travel story, but whether there's a holiday side or the shoot side.
Well, I will kind of let it take us where it takes us. And so, my question at this point, usually of the episode, is just it's the title of of the show is,
Mm.
Chris Barron, where have you been? You just listed a lot of places, but can you just, even without going into details necessarily at this point, but can you list any more places maybe you've been for work or for leisure, even since you've grown up, I guess, and become an adult?
Wow. Wow. Well, we were saying this just
It doesn't have
before.
to be comprehensive.
Well, we were talking about this just before we jumped on. And I was like this morning thinking about how many countries have I been to, and there's an app called Bean, Been, where it kind of helps you to figure it out. And I was looking, I was like 61 countries is kind of the tally that I've got. But I guess kind of if we want to go some of the highlights. Places for work would be, places like the Democratic Republic of Congo. I've worked in Egypt, Morocco, Namibia, like really far off flung places like Micronesia, a place called Truck Lagoon, which for any divers out there, it's kind of like a mecca of shipwreck diving. I've been, places like Laos, where else? Bosnia. I'm looking at sort of some of the more unusual places I've been to. Yeah, all over. I think places like Fiji, New Zealand, and I did a whole shoot for Discovery Channel where we basically did a really cool show called Free Ride, where essentially the show was dropping the presenter and a sort of directing cameraman in Rio de Janeiro with nothing but a backpack and a passport, and they had to get from Rio to Ecuador, I think it was, or Colombia, over 10 weeks, and sort of beg, borrow, steal, not steal, obviously, but hitchhiking and getting little odd jobs and that kind of stuff. And so we were the crew following them. And so, I did a big section of that was, catching up with the team in Argentina and going by road up through Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, and sort of really just getting like a real like on the ground sense of these countries. And it was absolutely amazing. I did a shoot in Angel Falls in Venezuela, did a massive, that Democratic Republic of Congo trip was actually living inside an active volcano for a week when we were shooting. That was a great story. I've got great stories from doing a cave shoot in New Mexico, in a place called Lechuquia Cave. Obviously now I'm living in Indonesia, and before this I've been living in Singapore, so done loads of travel around Southeast Asia, so places like Borneo. I've been to Cambodia, now Laos, I mentioned, and Malaysia, tons of time. Again, I don't want to bore your listeners just with listing off a bunch of places, but I guess that kind of covers a lot of some of the places I've been to.
It's absolutely incredible. And I will mention, we do kind of cheat a little bit on this podcast. I have had guests on that have sort of maybe not necessarily ever really settled down in one place, whether it was growing up because their families moved. And then since then, they've kind of done, it kind of sounds a little bit similar to, spend a few years here and really not have necessarily an end goal in mind, or even if they do. But I allow those, even if you lived in a place for a few years, I allow those to be included as travel stories because that's not where you originated. So, but I do want to ask, when you do your documentary, your filmmaking, how much time, I guess it's probably different every shoot, probably depends on how long you're in a place, but how much do you make it a focus or try to actually get out and explore on your own without cameras involved or anything like that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's really tough. When you're doing these shoots, like it's in the middle of a project. So typically, when you go and you get sent to Egypt for a 4-week shoot, which is one of the shoots I did, we were there for 4 or 5 weeks. Sort of during that time, I think by law in the UK, every 7 days that you work or something like that, you need a rest day. So on a rest day, you would have time. It's usually just sleeping in and trying to recover from the last 6 days of really long days. Sometimes we'd go, do a little bit of touristy stuff or little local restaurants and things like that. Sometimes, on rare occasions, if you're in somewhere really unique, you might be able to sort of ask, hey, can you just book my flight for a few days later? I'll pay for my hotel and all that kind of stuff. People do that from time to time. Typically, though, like after a shoot's done, like you got to come back to the office, especially if you're a director and producer, because the project's still ongoing. There's stuff to be done. When you're on a full-time production, it's kind of hard to take downtime for a number of reasons, particularly now because budgets are slashed and schedules are shorter. And I remember when I first started, I'd speak to those old hand BBC cameramen and producers and stuff, and they'd say, my day, the BBC would send us out and we might have, an extended recce of a few days, to really get a lay of the land and meet the people before we film. Whereas in my day, when I sort of was growing, it was like 1 day recce for everything, and then you got to go straight to the shoot. Sometimes we don't have recce days anymore. You kind of just go straight into it. But to answer your question, sometimes it happens. You get to sort of travel around a little bit afterwards. But really, like some of these shoots, you feel like you get such a privileged look at the country, particularly the far off ones. Like, you go so far beyond what the tourists often get access to. So after you've seen that, you're kind of like, well, been very privileged to see what I've seen. And also you're so tired, sometimes you just want to go home and get a good night's sleep. But we do on these shoots get a really good flavor of the country. We meet so many local people, we get to eat the local food, and it is a lot of work. But at the same time, you are really scratching that travel itch as well and get to know the country.
Yeah, like you said, you're learning more and experiencing more than most would be able to just hopping a flight and booking a hotel somewhere. So, which is really awesome. Of the places that you've been doing the work, can you maybe pick one or two as like maybe the most impactful of the places that you've been?
Yeah. Oh, impactful. Oh, geez. So I did a project which some listeners might be familiar with for National Geographic Channel called One Strange Rock with Will Smith. And on that show, we just got so privileged to go to so many incredible places all over the world. It was like bucket list central for a lot of like places that people get to go. And I could go on for quite a while with stories from different places. I mentioned, I guess the first one that comes to mind is the Democratic Republic of Congo. We flew into Rwanda and drove into Kigali, and then drove to the border of DRC, a little town called Goma. And we were filming this big volcano story in a place called Mount Nyiragongo, which is just sort of outside of Goma in Virunga National Park. And so sort of the essence of the story was, one episode kind of, again, to go back a little bit, One Strange Rock is kind of a 10-episode documentary about sort of the formation of the earth and how everything came to be, from solid crusts to water to life to intelligence to all this kind of stuff. So everything we see around us, how did it all come to be? And this was one of the early episodes where we're looking at sort of the radioactivity in the core and all this kind of stuff. And the story essentially was, we have a volcanologist who's going to come with us and try and take a live lava sample of actual lava, going up to this perpetual lava lake, which is in Mount Nyiragongo. There's a lava lake all year round, and it's quote unquote safe enough that you can go there and try and take a lava sample. And the lake is massive. It's like 200 meters across, whatever. It's 500 feet. It's a big lake. So that was the mission. And so we arrived in Goma with all of our gear. We're going to be camping for a week, getting everything we need. We hired, obviously, a local fixer, helps to help facilitate a lot of things. I think we had like 73 bags, and that's obviously everything from our filming equipment to personal luggage to food, everything that we'll need for the luggage. And obviously, our little 6-man, 8-man crew is not going to be able to carry everything up, which from, I think, the starting point to the top of the mountain, essentially the lip of the crater, was like a 6-hour hike. So the fixer had arranged for the local villagers, I think it was about 110 of them, to help carry us everything up. And we're talking like generators and large camp tents and everything. So the local village were incredible. We obviously got to know and chat with them as well. And as we were doing this big 6-hour hike, and then got to the summit, and then, kind of lipping over to the summit, looking in for the first time and seeing this massive lava lake in the bottom of the crater. The crater is also really, really big. I think we measured it was about, from the top of the crater where we were standing going down into it to our campsite was going to be about 400 meters, or maybe not as much as that, but like good 200 meters, a long way down.
Jeez.
And it was, you know, using zip lines to get all the equipment down to certain sections, carrying a lot of it on our backs. You know, once it was kind of all the villagers had helped us to carry it to the top of the mountain, to the top of the volcano, then it was kind of down to us to, you know, we had a safety team that rigged ropes all the way down the edge of the crater. And we, you know, got our harnesses on, roped up, and literally carrying bag by bag individually to the bottom of the campsite. And there's a big sort of flat layer, you know, that's kind of above the lava lake, so which is a bit safer. And so we carried everything down. You know, I think it took us multiple trips. We were exhausted by this point because it's a very strange place, because at the top of the crater, you know, it's very high, maybe 3,000 meters, 3,500 meters. So it's cold. But obviously when you get down into it, it's much warmer. And obviously the physical exertion is much warmer as well. And yeah, so we're carrying all these bags down. You know, people were setting up the camp for our week-long trip, week-long stay. You know, we had, because Virunga, for anyone who knows, is obviously there's issues with M24 and violence and some of the gang stuff. So a guy with an AK-47 was sort of camped at the top at all times. And also with the office back in London, you know, we'd agreed to have daily check-ins because, you know, we don't know it's an active volcano. You never know what's going to happen. And we were told that there is a UN helicopter if anything happens, but because of the volcano and the weather, there's no guarantees that it's ever going to be able to fly in and rescue you. So you've got to have your own way of evacuation just in case. And so like when we're climbing down, it's probably like, I don't know, like a good 20, 30 minutes of like down climbing. And then, you know, double that to go back up, you know, 40 minutes to get back up to the top. So yeah, we got down to the bottom and set up our tents, and I can send pictures of this for your social media if you want, but we had a big sort of base tent with all of our equipment and stuff in it, and we share meals in there, and then had individual tents for us around about it. You know, one of the other things that, yeah, I remember very clearly is we had to have these big sort of like masks on, like ventilators, because of not just the toxic gases, you know, which are kind of coming out the side of the crater up your trouser leg as you're climbing down. But also because of the lava and the wind, it whips up the lava into these little microscopic pieces of glass that if you breathe them in for a long period of time, they're just going to cause like huge amounts of damage to your lungs. So with the wind in particular places, we'd have to put the gas masks on to protect our lungs. Anyway, so that kind of gives you a picture of us getting in there. And about, you know, we're doing our filming and everything, and what happened was, on the second night I think we were there, we noticed at nighttime to the side of the crater, you know, there's a beautiful orange glow from the lava lake, and that's all bubbling away. It's all fine, normal. But to the right side of the crater, where, you know, at nighttime it was completely black usually, there was an orange glow coming from the side of a small orange glow. And the volcanologist was like, we probably have to keep an eye on that over the next 24 hours, because if that's like a new vent that's going to pop up, that could cause a significant issue. And it's really rare for this volcano to kind of do that. But we thought, okay, we'll keep an eye on it. And at the same time, we had a safety guy, you know, ex-military, you know, really experienced. And his job was to sort of go down from the layer that we were camping to the bottom layer, and then walk, you know, with the volcanologist over to the lava lake and get the sample. So that's what we'd planned. And the next day, we kind of woke up, and that vent had grown way more than we had thought, and it was sort of now a very bright orange glow and starting to like spurt out like lava bombs, you know, little lava bombs. And
do you
like,
remember at that point like how you felt? Were you nervous and worried at all?
Not at that point. I think we had a volcanologist with us. It's kind of like, you know, all of these shoots, you know, you have the experts, you have the people, health and safety people. You kind of just look to them, and if they get nervous, then you're like, okay, you know, now it's time to worry. But you kind of, it's like if you're on an airplane, you know, and if you're afraid of flying, just look at the air crew, you know, the stewards and stuff. If they're super chill, you're super chill. You know, it's like, you know, it's once they start panicking, then you're like, okay, you know, maybe there's something to worry about. But no, they were like, okay, this is fine. We can monitor the situation. And, you know, again, I mentioned like doing the check-in with the office in London on a daily basis at 10 o'clock in the morning. And so the last one I sent to them was like, I forgot to mention, I had to climb out of the crater to do the radio call because the satellite signal didn't go inside the crater into the caldera. So I'd done that the day before and said, hey, all good here, we're good. So super chill, getting stuff done. But there is a little orange glow at the side. We're keeping an eye on it. No, nothing to worry about for now. And then climbed down and said, yeah, no worries. Keep us in touch tomorrow. And so all this was going on basically. And the next day, said the vent had grown, and the safety guy was going to go down the ropes, which is a good 60, 80 meter drop into an area. And he was about to go down, and everyone was looking. The cameras were rolling, all this kind of stuff. And his brother was one of the other safety teams with a much clearer view of the vent that had started sort of bubbling away. And by this point, it's quite a significant cone. It's like a mini volcano at the side of the crater kind of thing. I'm thinking this thing is, I don't know, probably like 20, 30 meters high by this point, and kind of cone-shaped and spurting out lava bombs. So our safety guy's on the edge of the ropes. He's about to go down, and his brother goes on the radio, and he says, don't go. I have a bad feeling. And we kind of stopped and talked about it for a few minutes, and we're deliberating because, this is like a key shot of like the show. If we can't go down, we've kind of failed the mission, and that's causes so many problems for like editorially telling the story. But at the same time, any directors, and I wasn't directing, I was a producer on this one, but the director's responsibility first and foremost is to the safety of the crew. So we took 5 minutes, chatted about it. And in that time, that cone had collapsed, and it kind of had swelled with lava within it, and then it kind of a side of the cone had collapsed, and a river of lava was now flowing basically where that guy would have been standing and at the bottom of the cliff. And the heat would have been such that the nylon ropes would have melted, and so he would have been trapped down there, and we couldn't rescue him. And so we were like, holy moly, what? Like, we were filming the whole all this kind of going on and stuff, and so at that point, we're like, okay, this is getting a little crazy because the lava bombs were getting a little bit higher, maybe within about 200 feet of our camp. So me and the director is we're stuck with a problem. We can't finish our story. We have to sort of find shortcuts through the script, come home to the office, because one thing you can't do in a documentary is come home without a story. You can't film half a story and then, having spent all this time and money and effort, come back with nothing that you can't use in the edit. So we were sitting there frantically figuring out, while everyone else was figuring out an evacuation plan, we were like, great, we have to shoot this, and this, and at least we can come home with a complete story. And so we cut the shoot short by about a day or so because of what was happening with this little lava cone. And I say little lava cone, it was quite big. And so the lava bombs that were landing were, like the size of basketballs. And in the chaos of all this happening over the sort of, 24 hours or so, I had forgotten to go and do my 10 a.m. check-in with the office because all this chaos was happening. We were trying to fix the story and get all the stuff we needed. And so the last thing the office would heard was, yeah, we're all good, but there's this little thing happening to the side of the volcano. We're not sure what it is. We're going to keep monitoring it. Then they don't hear from us past check-in. Then the next day, then I go up and I get on the call. This is maybe like a good 12 hours after check-in. And I get an earful from the production manager, rightly so. She was like, we're about to send fuck all the police. It's like, we don't know what was happening. And I was like, I'm so sorry. It was chaos, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, calm down. Everything was fine. Chaos, crisis averted. I said, look, everyone's fine. We're safe. We decided to cut the shoot early, get everybody out. And, we all evacuated safely. Again, there's a great photo of us kind of coming out that I can share with you. If you want for your socials. It's kind of like we had this big sort of A-frame thing that helps us to sort of get people out quickly, and it's sort of me hanging there, lava lake in the background, and you can very clearly see the river of lava and the vent to one side, which was a very cool picture to have on my sort of, and the guy that took it was the safety guy who would have gone down. He's got a real sense of humor, and he just he's like, oh, Chris, just stay there for 1 second. I'm going to take a photo of you. And I was like, smiling, thumbs up, whatever. And he took a photo, and he kind of came in from get off the ropes and stuff. He's like, okay, that is probably the best Tinder photo you're ever going to have. So, and it was a good conversation starter. Let me put it that way. So that was really funny. Anyway, long story short, we came out, we got everybody out and got down the mountain. But it was an amazing experience, obviously, being somewhere like that. And,
And to be clear, Will Smith hosted the show. He wasn't there.
Correct. Yeah. So Will Smith was, when we kind of during the production, this was the first series on any first series of this scale. Like you kind of you're always massaging the format, figuring out what works, what doesn't work. And for anyone who's seen the show, you'll know that the astronauts are the ones that are kind of like very prominent throughout the show. And the original idea was to use the astronauts as the sort of like, the narrating voices. And at some point late in the production stages, once we've done many of the shoots, I think it was kind of decided at a very high level between Nat Geo and the executive producer and stuff, like it'd be great to have like a big name voice like helping to talk about this, help narrate essentially. And it was decided on Will Smith. And anyone that keeps following the show in season 2 and season 3 and stuff, like Welcome to Earth was kind of the spiritual successor to One Strange Rock. And in that series, Will does go out and do a lot of the stuff that we got to do, the cool stuff. So yeah, so that was kind of one of the craziest stories I had. I had another one in New Mexico. I don't know how much you can kind of tell me if you want me to stop, but I've got stories and all day long if you want. But
I don't. You go as long as you'd like.
I mean, I guess the other one that's kind of very significant for me. I mentioned I was a producer on the volcano shoot in Congo, and it's as a producer, you're always trying to like find that like promotion to director. It's always hard. You might be super experienced, but you're always going to have to find someone to take a leap of faith on you as a producer to give you your first directing gig. And that's always hard, to find someone to champion you. But on this one, again, this is on One Strange Rock. We had a shoot in New Mexico in a place called Lechuquia, which is a really, really big cave system underneath New Mexico. I think it's about the 10th longest cave in the world. I think it's about 320 kilometers of passages or something like that. And this cave is like not somewhere you can go. I think the location is kept secret. They've sealed the door. There's a lock on it. It's part of the national park that protects it. And that's mainly for a couple of reasons. Obviously for safety. It's a very, very dangerous cave with a lot of big drops and all this kind of stuff. The other thing is that it's got a huge amount of scientific research going on there. It's a very protected cave from a microbial standpoint. A lot of the microbes are, very protected for scientific purposes because they haven't really had a connection with the outside world. So they're deemed good for research. And also like some of the cave formations, like I think some of the biggest crystals, like big crystal chandeliers that come from the roof and all that kind of stuff that people might be familiar with if they watched David Attenborough's Planet Earth Series 1. This cave featured quite prominently in there. Anyway, so again, I was the producer, same director actually, it was the volcano one. I was a producer on this one, and we planned to go again for like 6-7 days down underground. From the surface, it was about 6 or 7 hours of caving to get to our base camp, which was quite deep in the cave because, it's not all the places that we wanted to film were like quite deep and we could come in and out every day. It just wasn't feasible. And they told us very clearly at the start, like for every hour that you go into the cave in terms of trekking, it's a day's worth of rescue, because of the resources and the logistics it takes to get people out who've maybe broken a bone. So we were caving 6-7 hours in. That was a week to get us out if someone had broken something. And they said that I think in the 90s, a woman was doing some climbing, as in like trying to find new leads in the cave, and had fallen and broken her femur. And I think it said it took them, 400 cavers to get her out. And they had to blast parts of the cave. And it was just it was a huge ordeal. The woman came out safely and stuff, which was good. But they said, we want to avoid this at all costs, obviously. Anyway, so that was all in our minds. And so we'd gotten all the way down and, it's really incredible cave. And I hadn't done a huge amount of caving at this point. And, I did a little bit just recreationally, but not to this degree. But I was a rock climber and most of the people there are seasoned sort of explorer types. So it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that actually, if you were sort of adventurous with things like that before all of this.
Yeah, so I'm a rock climber. And it was one of the reasons that I got onto the show because a lot of these shoots require rope skills and, comfort with heights and living in uncomfortable conditions and all that kind of stuff. So we all had those kind of skills. But you can say this, in the office, like, yeah, I'm sure I'll be fine. You never know really, whether you'll be fine until you put yourself in a situation like that, because so few of us get those opportunities to do something like that on a regular basis.
Sure.
So the crew was like, yeah, we'll be fine. And so, we're going through the cave and there's some big drops. I remember one, I think it's basically like maybe like 150 foot, 200 foot sort of vertical drop. And you kind of get on the ropes at the top of this. It's kind of, you're walking along this passage. It's maybe like 6 feet high, so 7 feet high. So it's very comfortable walking in it. And then it kind of drops and there's a hole in the floor. And you kind of get on ropes. And then you kind of very slowly like lower yourself down. And then you kind of going into this, honestly, like a black abyss, and your head torch is just barely like a pinprick on all the walls. It's incredible. And you're basically falling through the ceiling like a spider on a string down into this massive chamber. And that's such a huge, I can even remember the feeling in my stomach like, whoa, like this is, this is like something like it's a new experience. Like everyone was like done skydiving, like that sort of feeling of your mind going, okay, we haven't done this before. This is crazy. And sort of coming down that was amazing. And then continuing hours through caving. And then another section was like 20 minutes of squeezing through, like imagine a block of Swiss cheese. And you're basically pushing your bag, your caving pack in front of you for like 20 minutes and like going up and then twisting your shoulders around and pushing your bag through again and coming down and all sorts of uncomfortable positions. So yeah, so we kind of got to the base camp, and the director at the time, he everyone's kind of getting their stuff unpacked and whatever, but the director at the time was clearly sort of agitated, and no one really knew what was going on. He was just sort of in a heightened state and sort of a little bit pacing a lot and talking quickly and all that kind of stuff. And we started our trek, 8 in the morning, 7 in the morning, whatever. And by the time we got down to base camp, when we had breaks and stuff, it was like, evening. So we were kind of all tired and ready to go to bed. Had our dinner and we all kind of put our camp down. Within about like very quickly, we could all hear, because in the cave it's dark, we turn all the lights, it's pitch black. We could hear someone like shuffling around, making coffee or whatever. And basically, long story short, we woke up the next morning and the director hadn't slept a wink really. And he had a real bad sort of, it wasn't claustrophobia because he wasn't claustrophobic necessarily, but it was just, I think, having that level of like weight of rock above you, being that far from the surface, just really put him in a state of panic.
I was gonna say like a panic attack. Yeah.
Yeah, he was just really not in a good way. Like, again, once you haven't slept, your decision making is not great. And, for anyone who's been in a cave, like there are no flat surfaces. When you wild cave, like you're basically just walking across massive boulders that have fallen from the ceiling at one point. So we were all thinking, well, if he twists an ankle or worse, like that's gonna trigger the whole rescue thing that they said under no circumstances get injured down there. So yeah, it was decided that for safety reasons that they should evacuate him from the cave. Essentially, the script and the directing reins were handed to me with the rest of the crew. And obviously, as a producer, I'd worked with the director for many weeks, building the schedule, the shot list, the script, refining everything. So I was very familiar with everything, and so I was in a good position, both from preparation standpoint, but also like an experience in television standpoint, to carry on the shoot and direct it. And it was essentially a battlefield promotion to a director. And we had a great shoot. I had the trust of the crew behind me. It was great because they knew and liked me, but also like they knew I was put in this position, so they're very helpful and understanding with trying to get good shots, and me trying to overcompensate for my lack of experience by going for big ambitious stuff. But yeah, we pulled it off. We had a great shoot, a great story. Kind of came back to the office and was thanked for taking on the directing role, and I was very fortunate because I got in that series. They're great. Chris, you've shown you can direct now. Here are more shoots that you can go and direct. And so I kind of got my sort of boost to director from that shoot. But yeah, it was an extraordinary experience. Just again, being in a cave. And that's part of the things I love about this job is that you get fortunate and privileged to get to go places that very few people go. And I think they said at the time, I think more people had been to the moon or something. No, it wasn't the cave because the cave had been visited, but there was a particular lake that we got permission to film at, and it's a very protected lake within the cave, quite deep in, and that you had to swim across. And so we had to disinfect ourselves, put special clothing on so we didn't, dirty the water. But on the other side of that lake was an extraordinary room with these kind of like weird crystal mushrooms coming from the floor and like, things dangling from the ceilings. It was like something from a dream or from like Willy Wonka or something like that. It's in the show if people want to see it. But they said at that time that I think more people had been to the moon than stood on the other side of that lake. And we were like, okay, that's amazing, sort of, again, privileged place to be. So it's a very cool job, and you come away with lots of stories.
Yeah, that puts things in perspective. Do you remember, just side note completely, just my own curiosity, what was the temperature like way down there?
It was beautiful. It was like, again, I know a lot of your listeners might be Americans to Fahrenheit, but like in Celsius, like low 20s, so like 23, 24 degrees. It was beautiful.
Wow.
I don't know. Let me try and convert that quickly for people. So it's like
I feel
24
like
Celsius to Fahrenheit.
70s.
That's, yeah, like 75 Fahrenheit.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome.
So
I wasn't sure if it would get warmer or if it would get colder.
yeah, it
So,
depends on the cave. You get some caves which are really humid and really warm and really like not pleasant. Others which are freezing cold. Like I think Europe, a lot of the caves can be really cold. But this one was just perfect. It was very strange because the walls have these very tiny gypsum crystals coming out of it. And again, every cave is kind of slightly different. But these gypsum crystals absorbed any kind of sound. So you might be in this big room, but it's almost suffocating because it's like all the sound is just like sucked up by the gypsum crystals, and you feel like you're in this like soundproof booth. So it's a very strange place to be in some ways.
that's just incredible. I have to check out the episodes. Listen, I can't believe we're creeping on an hour already. I'm not in a rush. I don't want to say that, but
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just shocked. I just happened to look at the timer. Just again, my own curiosity. We could take this however you want to, but not necessarily in that series because I know what you were doing in that series, so it's much more focused on the Earth itself. But have you
Hmm.
done anything that? And again, we don't have to stick with your work, but I'm just curious. Anything that like had anything to do with Native people in a place, or any people in a place that sort of impacted you in a way, or whether it was even just like, wow, this is incredible, or something cool, something funny, anything that's happened with your.
Yeah, so let me have a think. I'm just trying to rack through all the shows that I've done in the past. Again, a lot of them are like science and adventure, but I did
Mhm.
one when I was working in Singapore for a production company there. We did a sort of quite extended shoot for like, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks in the Sumatran forest in Indonesia. And it was kind of about, like, it was a story about logging and things like that, but also just like the natural beauty and the local people. So we did stories about like, the people that live in this particular part of the forest that we were filming. They've got very ancient ways of collecting honey. So you've got these trees, you've got a normal, like a huge, thick forest. But then every once in a while, you have these extraordinarily tall trees. And the name of them escapes me, but big, long trees with big, very straight trunks that kind of fan out at the top. So these guys, a particular kind of bee, Apis dorsata, I think is the name. So it's one of the largest honeybees, I think, in Indonesia or something like that. Anyway, so they love these trees, and they put their hives right at the top because it's away from predators and all that kind of stuff. But the local indigenous people there, they devised a way of like sort of climbing these trees. I think they use like a very powerful slingshot, and like the elder like would like have the right to like find the slingshot and like get it the right way. And you're talking, I'm gonna say like, I'm trying to think in meters and feet, but like probably good 20, 30 meters, 100 feet off the ground to try and hit a branch and get this like weight over it so they can pull a rope down. So they get the rope down and they pull the rope up, and essentially they kind of, the rest of the village will pull one guy with a bucket up to the top of the tree, and he's collecting the honey. He's getting stung by bees the whole time. And we filmed this whole thing, and they obviously got like smoke that helps them to like calm the bees and everything. But this guy's like 100 feet off like the jungle floor, and collects as much honey as he can, without enduring as many stings as he can, even with the smoke trying to calm them. And then basically like lowering him down. And at the bottom, like, because honey is such a treat, as it is for anyone, but like, when your diet is essentially like fish and cassava and things like that, like having a fresh honey from the hive, like it was just the joy on these people's faces. And it kind of becomes like a big village event after that. We bring the honey back to the village. All the women and the children are like feasting in. It's just like everyone is just so delighted at having they don't do it that often, getting these beehives, but it was just extraordinary to film such a simple moment, with people have such simple lives, but the joy of having something as simple as honey was just it put a lot of things in perspective. So yeah, that one kind of sticks out for me. Um, and it was actually, we filmed another sequence with another gentleman in Sumatra who's a fisherman, and I think he had a beehive very close to him as well. They were like, "Great, you want to go and grab that beehive?" And this is more of a funny story because we were filming from a distance, and because that when the hive was so high above the canopy, it was fine because the bees kind of stick up there. But this guy had lived on the river, and the beehive was very low to the ground. And when he took the hive, my God, it was just, and he didn't have any protection on. Like it was just chaos, like thousands of bees. We were filming with a drone, and we took the drone down. It was covered in like bee parts because there were so many bees. It was like a bee massacre that the drone had experienced. Because I think that the bees may have also been attacking the drone, thinking it was like an eagle or a predator or something like that as well. But yeah, it was just extraordinary.
Oh my god! And he ended up okay, I assume, but probably
Yeah.
battered, pretty battered.
Well, actually, interesting enough, like I think they're relatively used to it. But on the same
Oh my
shoot, I
gosh!
I had a we were doing another story actually in the forest, and I think one of the stories was a biologist or an ecologist or something who was looking at the insect diversity. And the best way that they do this sometimes is they go out to the forest in the middle of the night, and I think a lot of people who've been out in these kind of places, one of the last things you want to do is turn on a light because all the insects flood toward the light. But these guys did that on a massive scale. They basically took a bright white sheet from from wherever, and then strung it up between two trees, sort of vertically, so not like a hammock or whatever, but like vertically, actually at a slight angle, sorry. And then they just shone like a huge bright light onto this sheet. And of course, it was just this like massive, huge influx of like, praying mantises and insects and flying bugs and moths. And it was just extraordinary. But two things happened. The first one was we were filming just an interaction between the ecologist and whatever. And the cameraman was trying to get a good angle, like kind of looking down up with the two people with the sheet in the background, and he was holding this shot and they were chatting away, and I was looking at my director's monitor and I could see the corner of my eye, like the cameraman kept shifting and whatnot, and I was like, "Are you okay?" He just sort of like nodding his head, and I was like not saying anything, like because he didn't want to interrupt the conversation. And when the conversation came to a wrap, he just kind of turned the camera off and stopped recording, turned the camera off, put the camera down, and sort of walked away. I just took a moment. I was like, "You okay?" He's like, "When I was filming that, I put my knee into an ant's nest, and the the crazy guy had basically just been endured being bitten by ants for like a good 5 minutes while like filming this scene." And I was like, "Why didn't you say anything?" And we got back to camp. He took his trousers off, and oh my god, like it was a massacre on this poor guy's legs. It was just like hundreds of welts and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, "You should have said something. The shoot isn't that important." Like, So he was seen by the medic and stuff. He was okay,
He just didn't want
but
to ruin the shot. Wow.
he didn't want to ruin the shot. And I was like, "Damn, you are a trooper. You are an absolute trooper for doing that." I didn't ask him to. I didn't want him to do that, but for what he did, it was incredible. And I was like, next time that happens, like we're just going to stop filming, and we're going to get you to some safety and find a different shot because it's not worth it. But the other weird thing that happened on that particular night as well was we were filming and filming. It was all great, getting good shots, lots of close-ups of insects and stuff. And then out of the darkness, we heard this like a really deep like wing flap of an insect. It wasn't a bird or anything. And then the local guys that we are there like, "Oh, like, okay, we need to be careful now." That is essentially what they're saying is this is, I think you had them in America, like the murder hornets, the really, really big, giant Asian hornet. And they basically said like, if you get stung by this thing, you will pass out. And so we were trying to like figure out what was going on. We couldn't really tell where it was. Essentially, it landed on the white sheet, and we captured it both for the safety of everybody, but also to film it and everything. But yeah, so we're filming with this giant Asian hornet, and but that few minutes where we were like, "Where is it?" We could hear it. Everyone was like, "Is it on me? Is it on me?" But yeah, kind of reminds me, like speaking to a lot of the natural history cameramen that do all the David Attenborough stuff. They say that, you know, of all the different like tiers of different shoots that they send people on, like all the newbies and all the the people that are sort of new to the stuff, they don't get the first pick of the litter of they get all the one that no one wants to do is the jungle shoots essentially because it's just filled with insects. It's hot, it's sweaty, it's hard, and then the ones that people that all the senior guys get to do, they get first pick. They all go on the polar shoots because it's like expensive kit and like like filming and comfortable. Again, it's freezing cold, but you're covered in really nice Arctic stuff, and don't have to deal with the bugs, obviously. So that was interesting as well.
It's just incredible. And this is really cool. This is a take on travel that we've never experienced on a podcast before. So I really appreciate you for this.
Yeah,
it's
no
like,
worries.
It's the behind the scenes stuff that even if we watch, it's actually going to be even cooler now to see these scenes and go like, oh, I know it must have been this shot when he fell and got destroyed by fire ants or whatever.
Yeah.
Very, very
Exactly.
cool. I do want to touch on travels that you've had just recreational, if that's okay. But is there anything else from your work that was just a standout story, memory, experience that you kind of would be remiss if you didn't tell us before we move on, or we can move on?
Well, I've got so many tales, just off the brief. I mean, the thing that a lot of people say is the Lechuquilla thing. Like experienced cavers from all over the world, like would always love to go there into that cave. Another one is like I mentioned it earlier, is Truck Lagoon in Micronesia. A lot of divers, that is their like, diving mecca, and they save up thousands and thousands of dollars to try and go there. And I went there as a director to direct a shoot, and I didn't even have like a PADI license, diving license. So I quickly in London got my diving license and went there, and because I was like, I'm not going to go to this amazing place and not be able to dive. But as a very quick anecdote, like I did all my theory side of it, but for anyone who does a PADI license, you got to do like I think it's 5 dives or something with a dive master or an instructor to get your fully qualified license. I didn't have time to do that in London, and I was really bummed. Anyway, long story short, we get to Micronesia and doing all these cool shoots and stuff. And again, like I was directing it, so I didn't need to be in the water. It was just working with a cameraman to get the shots. But at the end of each day, the dive master we had was like, I think I mentioned it, like I'd love to dive, but I only got half of it. And he's like, well, I'll do them with you. Like I'm a dive instructor, dive master. All we need is like 10, 15 minutes at the end of each day. And so basically what happened is the end of each day, like everyone was chilling out, having dinner or whatever. And, before the sunset, me and this guy would go down, and do my, I don't know what you'd call them, instructor dives or whatever, final lessons or whatever, to make sure I could clear my mask and buoyancy and all that kind of stuff. I was essentially doing that, but like in the most, some people go for years dreaming of, it's like their bucket list place. And so a lot of people, like my dad and my brother, are both divers, and like, I cannot believe that you went to Truck Lagoon and just did your like PADI diving license on like, doing penetration. I wasn't doing penetration dives, but like going down to the deck of a ship is like my 16 meters or whatever. And they were just like, I can't believe you did that. I hate you.
You may be the only person to ever do that.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone that goes there has been diving for years and years and years, and they're all like,
Right.
But yeah, anyway, so that was a funny story as well. But we can go into recreational stuff because I'll go on forever with the shoot things in for work.
And I could listen forever. So, but yeah, and you've been to some amazing places just on your own. I guess just in the interest of time, and again, I'm not in a huge hurry, but in the interest of everyone's time, I guess. Are there, you and I first sit down and just like I said, we're having a beer and just talking about our favorite travel stories. Is there a couple that just stick out to you as these are some of my favorite memories of just visiting a place and not having to direct anyone or film or, or
Yeah, it's always nice. I take a camera, and even then, like, I feel like I'm taking a camera because I love photography still. And I feel like sometimes I like have to put the camera down and just enjoy a place sometimes. But I always love places where I can just get, sort of switch off and turn off everything and be a bit more remote. Anyway, I mean, the one that really comes to mind most recently was February 2025. I went to Japan for the first time, and it was everything I'd hoped it would be and more. It was just incredible. And so
Where did you go?
we went to Hokkaido. We flew into Tokyo, And then we didn't spend much time on the main island on Honshu. We jumped straight up to Hokkaido, and I think it's basically spent like 2 weeks around one resort called Niseko, which is a ski resort in the winter. And honestly, it was just I've been a skier since I was young. I think I started when I was like 5 or 6, and been skiing on and off throughout my life. But I went with my wife, and she's Swiss, so she's obviously a skier as well. And so skied in Niseko and did just exploring the region, and it was unbelievable. Just the food, the people, the scenery, the landscapes, the light, the air. It was just everything about it. The culture was just everything I'd hoped it would be, And seeing Japan, it was sort of a beautiful, welcoming culture, but sort of just so different from a lot of other places you've seen and been. The food, we haven't talked much. I'm sure a lot of people talk about food on this show, but we haven't talked about food yet. All the other previous stories are basically just like freeze dried packages of camp food. But in Japan, obviously, just the seafood, the food itself was so different and so incredible. And my favorite holidays is when I'm exercising as well. So obviously skiing, a lot of days, coming back, you feel like you've done a lot of hard work, have a beer, chill out. Yeah, so that I don't know if have you been to Japan?
No, I haven't. It is very high on my list, and I thought
Yeah,
about even like when I go, if I finally get a chance to. I mean, my gosh, I feel like I'd have to spend a month to try to visit the places that I want to, really give a fair shake to, and Hokkaido is one of those places. So I was really
it's
interested. I don't think I've heard anyone on the pod say that they've been there. So
oh man, like I cannot even describe it, especially in wintertime. It's because you're skiing on a volcano, an extinct volcano this time, and and but you're like, especially where you go. I don't know. There's Mount Yote, which is a very big, beautiful conical volcano, but the place you ski is on the neighboring volcano, and on a clear day, it's just like these two big, massive volcanoes, and then just relatively flat land. You see farmland and all that kind of stuff. And oh man, you got to go at some point if you can. It is just amazing. So Hokkaido is definitely up there for me. I'm trying to think. I've been to a lot of amazing places. Um, Again, very lucky to do so. I've been to Angkor Wat. We're very lucky in Cambodia, Angkor Wat
ooh,
Temple. And Angkor Wat's one of those places that a lot of people who've been, depending when you've been, it's swarming with tourists. Obviously it's an incredible UNESCO World Heritage Site, and you've got that famous Lara Croft temple that they call it, where they did all the shoots, and you essentially wait in line to get into the temple, and then you wait in line with lots of people like going around taking photos and whatever. We went just after COVID. This is like 2021, I think, and the country had just opened up maybe like a week or two before. And we got to Angkor Wat, and we had the almost the entire place to ourselves. And oh my God, we had a guide who was so grateful for us to be back. During COVID, they didn't have any work. So, I think he was doing farm work or whatever. And he was just so delighted to have us, and couldn't be more excited to show us, his local sites, the culture, tell us about everything. It was just such a magical experience, and it was because of the timing as well. Made it really special. So if anyone gets a chance to go to Cambodia and Angkor Wat, oh man, that is especially for the culture and everything as well. Um, yeah,
yeah,
I'm trying to
fantastic.
think.
And I've heard incredible things about being there. Again, not a place that I've been or really even given a lot of thought to going, but
Mm,
yes, sounds awesome. And you probably even got to see more and do more than anyone else normally would, just because of the timing. So that's awesome.
yeah, we got to get through a lot. I mean, I've got stories like, because again, like we lived in Dubai for a while in the UAE. The thing about when you live in a place, I know I said we're cheating here because I live there, but as you said, we
Hmm.
do travel as well. But like my dad was a geologist, and so he took us to places. He was obviously out in the field a lot and loved taking us as we were kids to camp. And so we would go out in basically in the sort of, Dubai is obviously a big city, but not a lot of people get to go like to the desert and the mountains that are beyond the desert in Dubai. And so he would take us for these camping trips as kids. Um, and it was so special just going for a weekend. And we'd found this place that it probably has a name, but we always call it the water holes. And, being a desert, being arid mountains as well, very dry, desert environment. But these water holes were essentially like, water, like canyons in sort of a valley with waterfalls flowing through them and pools that you could jump into that were cool, like very cool water. And so I remember just like going and jumping off these like 20, 30 foot cliffs into these deep pools. Oh man, that's like a child, when you have those like core memories of your childhood, like that is right up there for me. And I think there's a photo of me as a like a 3-year-old being thrown through a waterfall like by my mom or my dad and into the pools. And again, that huge joy of face of joy. But there's so many places, even like big cities. If you live in a big city, do your best to try and see what is in the remote areas outside of that, because sometimes there's some real hidden gems out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I see where you got your sense of adventure from at a very young age. It's like someone who learns how to swim by being pushed into the pool.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, you know
Just
what? You're
do
gonna
it.
rock climb and rock dive and dive and stuff like
Yep.
that.
Yep.
We're gonna start you
Absolutely.
now.
Yeah. And the other, I mean, if anyone been in the UAE, it's not in Dubai, but outside Abu Dhabi, my wife and I recently were back there for a wedding, and we went out to Liwa, which is maybe like, I don't know, a few hours drive from Abu Dhabi. And it's where they filmed the recent Dune movies. It is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. It is just if you imagine like just that sort of expansive Dune sea kind of thing. It just, when you, again, comparing it to like the jungle, which is just surrounded by life and all that kind of stuff. You go to the desert and you walk out at sunrise at 5 o'clock in the morning and the sand is cool. You feel it through your toes. You go for a walk along these endless dunes that just go on for hundreds of miles, and you just go for a walk and it's sterile. I mean, sterile to a certain extent, but we encountered camel spiders. We encountered, these massive desert geckos. We encountered desert fox and these sort of oryx, the desert deer and antelope. But that, for anyone that gets the opportunity to go to Liwa, it is jaw-droppingly beautiful.
I think I'll leave that to your description. I can imagine it's probably beautiful. I don't think that one is for me, but
Oh,
more power
really?
to you. I don't know.
Not a
I don't
desert
know.
man.
No, I don't. I mean, I've never experienced it, I guess. So the closest
Yeah.
I've been to any sort of desert was not truly desert, but if you've ever been to Aruba, everyone thinks about how
Hmm.
tropical and beautiful and whatever, but it is. There's part of it that is basically desert, and so we took some
Yeah.
4-wheelers through there. But besides that, that's about my
Too much
extent.
sand. Not a big sand fan.
On a beach, I'm okay with it,
Okay. Yeah.
but
Okay.
if it's endless or practically endless, I don't know about that.
Yeah, there's just something for me about it. It gives me the same feeling as when you look up at the stars, like an endless sort of beautiful dark starry night. It just gives you that feeling of, I love it when things make you feel small and insignificant. I think that's
Yeah.
such an important part of what nature can do to you. It sort of puts everything in
Mhm.
perspective, and I think also puts you in your place. I think we as humans think that, we're all that, and, can do everything and the world is our playground, but really we're quite insignificant. When you look at deep time and where we are on the sort of geological scale and the scale of even planet Earth, we are just, a fraction of a second of existence. And I always find that feeling quite beautiful and humbling. And that's why I love going to a place, like I said, like, and you just stand on the top of a dune and all around you is just hundreds of miles of empty desert. Mm. It's a very special feeling, quite a unique feeling that you can't get any other way than going to these places, I think.
Yeah. And I definitely agree on the point of, we're very, very, very small, and I guess in the broader scheme of things, maybe insignificant. Obviously, we're very significant to each other, but
To each other,
yeah,
yeah.
I agree 1,000%, if that's
Yeah.
possible. So let's do this. Let me ask you before we get to, I have final 5 questions that I ask of every
Hmm.
guest. Before we get to that, if you can just think, and I don't mean to put you on the spot with this, I don't always do this, but just like the funniest story memory that you can think of in any of your travels. I know you told a couple things that were pretty funny, but whether it happened to you, your wife, your family, if you can think of anything off the top of your head, funny is always good.
Funny, 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 funny. Let me try and think.
Interactions with people somewhere, or just something, I like airport stories, or
I
you
mean,
know
There's a couple of airport stories that kind of could be kind of funny. I had one, actually, both of them occurred on shoots. One of them was, again, people might have experienced this, but, being quite a young assistant producer at the time, I did a shoot in New York with a crew. And as assistant producer, it's your job to sort of like make sure people get to the right place at the right time. Like, great, we're going to get to the airport. Everyone be downstairs by this point, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know, maybe I was quite new. Excuse me. Yeah, basically, I think because there's JFK and there's Newark, or LaGuardia. There's three airports, isn't there? Anyway, long story short, we get to I get everyone to JFK. Our flights, because as a film crew, you got lots of equipment, and we always try and arrive 3 hours early because check everything in and all that kind of stuff. So we arrived 3 hours early to JFK, and we're looking for our flight on the board, and I'm like, I don't see the flight. What the hell is going on? Internally panicking, obviously, because it's my responsibility to get everyone to the right place at the right time. And looking at the flight, and I go and ask someone, it's like, where is this flight? So that flight doesn't fly from here. It flies from I think it was Newark or LaGuardia, essentially one of the other airports. And I was just like, that feeling when your stomach just like goes, oh my God, like I have screwed up majorly here. Like this is not good. And I sort of had to go to the crew like, hey guys, so we're in the wrong airport. Just to let you know, we're in the wrong airport. And basically the director was like, okay, Chris, how are you going to fix this? I was like, okay. And I went out to the taxi rank and said, hey, we're in the wrong airport. And I think the guy just laughed because I don't think it's not the first time this has happened at all. And I think I was even on another podcast and they're like, oh man, that happened to me as well. So I said, look, here's, I don't know, again, the cliche, like, here's $100, like do your damnedest to get us to the other airport in time for our flight.
Drive fast, take chances.
Yeah, I was like, just do me a solid, man, please, please, please. And we made it. Like we got there, and we kind of got eye rolls from the check-in crew because it was like pretty late for the check-in. We were borderline, and they could look at it and they're like, "Oh man, you guys got like 30 bags. I'm gonna have to check all this in." Anyway, so we got our flight, but so it wasn't the end of the world. But I was like, "Oh, dude, like what a crazy
that feeling of panic is not fun."
Oh, dude, like, yeah, it was sort of pit in your stomach. You're like, oh man, what a mistake. But you try to make those mistakes only once in your career. And luckily, touch wood, that was being the only one. Always look at the call sheet.
Yeah, right. Awesome. This has been so much fun. I do want to offer you the opportunity. I know it's hard for you because you said you could talk all day long about different experiences and stuff, especially with the work that you've done. But I just want to say, one last time before I get to my final 5 questions, is there anything else that you can think of that's popped into your head that you're like, oh, I have to tell this? And I'm not telling you need to do that. I'm just asking.
Yeah. Again, I was trying to think of more funny stories for you that they just don't jump to the top of my head instantly. And I'm literally going around Google Maps right now to be like, what was I doing here? What was I doing there? But nothing is. I'm sure there's stuff in there, but I can't think of anything directly off the top of my head.
It is all good, my friend. Well, who knows? I ask you 5 questions.
If something comes to me, I'll come at the end maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I always give you a chance at the end too. So
yeah.
Okay. Well, let's jump into the final 5 questions. I don't know if you know these. I don't think you do.
Mm-hmm. I do not.
Yeah. So you mentioned food at one point in the podcast episode, and food kind of comes up when it comes up, but it always comes up with question number 1. And I phrased the question carefully. My listeners are sick of hearing me say this, but you haven't heard it. So, of all of the places in the world that you've been, outside of the home, of your home, I guess, wherever that home was at the time, what has been your favorite meal experience that you've ever had, or maybe a couple if you can't choose?
Oh, wow. Favorite food experience. There's one that jumps to mind instantly I mentioned that shoot where I was in South America, driving up through different places. And the great thing about that is that we didn't know where we would end up day to day. We were kind of just following the guys if they were hitchhiking or if they'd got a job at a plantation somewhere, or like, doing something, or just camping on the beach or whatever. So they kind of just text us saying, hey, here we are. And we would kind of go and find a accommodation in the local town. And this was in Peru. And we kind of found this tiny little beachside town. There couldn't have been more than like 40 buildings in this place, but it had like a place down at the waterfront. And until any point in my life, I'd never had ceviche. And the fixer was there. It was like, "You've never had ceviche?" And they were like, "I never." And I was like, I don't even think I knew what it was at the time. And they're like, "Oh my God. Okay, we're having ceviche." And we're in this tiny little place and basically sort of said to the owner of the restaurant, like, "Okay, this guy's never had ceviche. Bring him the best ceviche you can muster." And it was like just everything, because we were like the waves were crashing next to us, like it was the Peruvian music was playing in the background, and it's such a powerful flavor of ceviche, delicate but powerful at the same time. That really sticks in my mind. It's a very vivid memory, almost like a photograph of me. So I can remember what shirt I was wearing, I remember who I was with, remember the color of the plastic chairs and the tablecloth. And just, when food kind of literally can transport you back to a moment in time. That was my first taste of ceviche in a Peruvian village on the coast was definitely one of them.
That's fantastic. Real quick, I mean, ceviche is one of my favorite things. The best I've ever had was in Costa Rica, which is one of my favorite places. And Peru is one of my favorite places, although I've never been to a photo village like that, I don't think. Well, you hit me in the feels for both of those. So
nice. Yeah.
Did you have another, or is that was the one that stood out to you? I didn't.
Oh, good. I mean, I love Mexican food. I've never actually been to Mexico, believe it or not. It's definitely on my list of places to go. But like doing both, whether I was traveling or not traveling, like just the tacos in Los Angeles, in California in general, always hit home. I love food there. Tex-Mex barbecue in Texas, man, so much good barbecue. Yeah. Let me think. Even like obviously Southeast Asia has like some incredible food. Japan, like I mentioned before, that was a great food experience. Middle East, I've been to Egypt on shoots and sitting with the Bedouin, and they've got like fresh goat meat and stuff. Again, it's not always like the most refined food, but just the setting, the people you're with, the local Bedouin, the story, the campfire, the setting, the sun, the silhouetted mountains in the background when you're in the wadis and the mountains, just eating food like cooked off a campfire. Sometimes it's, not necessarily like the meal itself, the food itself, but the setting can be so powerful. I said, it's good the way you phrased it, like what's your favorite food experience? It's not just like, what is your favorite food? The experience is such a huge part of it,
Yep, absolutely. I've had guests tell me, in detail what where they were and what the situation was like and what it felt like. And I said, "Well, do you remember what you had?" And he said, "No, I think I had chicken." And I was like, "Okay, I need to rephrase my question and make sure I put it that way because like you said, it matters." So
as a Scottish person, I think I would be remiss if I didn't say haggis. Obviously having haggis. For anyone who hasn't tried it, should go and try it because, having a good meal of haggis, neeps and tatties is always good for the soul.
I don't think I've ever had haggis. I'm trying to remember if I ever have, but I knew that's what you were going to say as soon as you said that.
Yeah.
Question 2 is one of my favorites. I know most people are thrown by it, but sorry to do that to you. Of all the places in the world that you have ever been, even if I said to you, Chris, here's a free trip, just a recreational vacation, go have fun, I'll pay for it, you would say, no, thank you, I don't want to go back.
Oh, that's tough because you don't want to insult a place, So these places...
We're 50 episodes in, so come on.
Oh, really?
There's been plenty of insulting. No, I'm just kidding. And it's not always insulting either.
I mean, so the question was a place I've been to already that I wouldn't want to go back, or just anywhere in the world that I wouldn't want to go?
No, somewhere that you've already been that you would not go back.
I mean, the one that always comes to mind, unfortunately, is India. We went there for a shoot. I've never been there on holiday. I was there for a shoot. And we flew into New Delhi and we drove to Jaipur in Rajasthan for the Pushkar Camel Festival. And overall, like it was a crazy experience. But yeah, it just didn't... I think India is one of those places, it's like a love-hate. Either you love it, and I can understand why some people love it as well. But for me, it was too busy, too noisy, too chaotic, even like coming out the airport. And I've been to places where there's like, really pushy people that you have to sort of deal with, especially as a tourist and stuff. But India took it to a whole new level in some places, like coming out the airport, people trying to like take your trolley for you. And I'm like, are you trying to steal my trolley? And they're just trying to help because they want, you to pay
And
them.
with it.
Yeah, and yeah, so India was overwhelming, and I think other people love that overwhelming sort of like chaos of it, but it just didn't resonate for me. So yeah, I probably would. And also, I will say this in full disclosure: India is a big place, and I only saw a very small part of it. So I know that there are other places that maybe I should go, but that's just the first one that comes to mind for me.
No, it's excellent. I think I just like hearing the variety of the answers. That's very few times have I heard the same answer more than once.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah. It's pretty crazy. I have had some people decline, but it's very rare. Most people can come up with some place, even if it wasn't like I had a bad experience or I didn't like it. Sometimes it's just I've been there, I've done that. I don't need to go again, even if it was free. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just like to hear how people
Interesting.
take it.
Yeah.
So, well, let's flip that. We'll make it a little more happy. Of all the places in the world that you've been, and you've been a lot of places, if you could only go back to one or two places that you've already been, where would you have to go again?
As a, to live or just to visit?
Just to visit.
I mean, New Zealand. New Zealand is an incredible country. My wife and I are actually going back. I've been there for shoots and for holiday, and my wife has never been. And we decided we're going to go back. I'm going back, but she's never been. So we're going to New Zealand for our 40th birthdays, which are both 40 this year. So I'll take her to New Zealand, North and South Island, and do like a big camper van trip around South Island. But it's just such, it's got such variety, New Zealand. You know, the landscapes, the nature is so diverse and so unique. There's lots of adventurous stuff to do, which we both love. The food and the wine's great. Yeah, New Zealand is definitely up there. Japan, oh man, I sort of gushed before about Japan, but I think we'd love to go both back to Japan as well again because it's so much more to explore there that we feel like we just scratched the surface. I'm going to go with New Zealand and Japan. If I've only got one or two answers, that's what I'll choose.
That's excellent. But Japan again is on very high on my list, and New Zealand, I actually almost booked a ticket. And today I was just looking at flights. So
Oh wow!
I don't know when exactly this episode will air, but the beginning of January is kind of flights. Well, everyone else who
If
listens
you,
to this knows that my daughter lives there, and she's moving
oh,
from there
amazing!
sometime this year. So I need to get there while I
You got
have
to
a free
go.
place to stay. So
Well, I was going to say, if you needed advice where to go, let me know. But I think if your daughter lives there, she'll know all the best places.
yeah, hopefully I'll be okay. Okay, so question 4. So just 2 to go. Question
Yeah.
4 is of all the places in the world that you have not been, and I always say this, listeners are probably tired of it, but not bucket list. We're just talking one or two because, like, my bucket list is massive.
Mm.
Of all the places you've never been, if you could only get to one or two places that you've never been for a holiday, whatever, where do you absolutely have to go?
Oh man, again, it's always a tough one because there's lots of places on my list I'd love to go. Um, my wife and I have always talked about going to Mongolia. Again, you can see a theme in the places that I'm suggesting here: big landscapes and
Mm-hmm.
less people, remote environments. So Mongolia is somewhere that we'd love to go, just on a big driving adventure. I think I'd also be remiss if I didn't say Antarctica, because I've been to 6 continents, and I think that I would just love to go. Not just that I want to tick a box, but it just looks like an extraordinary place as well. I'd love to, again, like I'd love to sort of join like a scientific expedition in some respect, not just to go as a tourist. I'd love to sort of have some purpose and contribute in some way by being there. So yeah, Antarctica also.
Yeah, we've had 2 different people on the podcast that have been to Antarctica, and both of them basically, in so many words, sort of the same feeling of just complete and utter awe of being in
Yeah,
that place. So, yeah, very cool.
yeah.
I don't know if I could handle the boat ride to get there, from what I've heard, but
You can
I would be
fly.
willing to give it a try.
Yeah, I'm the same with
Oh, okay.
boats. I think the amount of Dramamine I'd have to consume to survive the boat ride would be crazy, borderline dangerous. But just because I know the seas are really rough, and on my show actually I had an Antarctic scientist just recently, a polar scientist, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm really lucky that he doesn't get seasicknesses, but basically everyone on the boat was just spending most of the time with a sick bag." Just sounds rough, but
Oh, but
he
it's
says
so worth it to get there.
if you're lucky, you can. I think you have to head to New Zealand, the southern tip, and then you can take a plane. I think it might be an American military aircraft, like one of those C-13 kind of things. But you can fly.
Wow. Okay. Well. then we'll see. Okay, final question. Question number 5. This one's easy. You already touched on part of it, but you already know the answer. Where are you going? What do you have already planned?
Ooh, yeah, like I said, I think most recently, my wife's traveling to Thailand, to Bangkok for a month. So I'm going to go visit her in February, just for a week, which is easy because we live in Indonesia. So it's just a very small hop. And like I said, we're going to New Zealand for probably, I think it's a 2-week trip, both North and South Island. We're going to go Waitomo Caves to show my wife the glowworms, which are extraordinary there, and just do a whole big RV trip around the South Island. And then after that, it's my father's 70th, and he's kind of based between Thailand and Australia, but he'll be in Australia where my brother lives. So we'll do a big family trip, and on our way back from New Zealand, go to Brisbane, the Sunshine Coast, up there and visit with them for his birthday. And then beyond that, I don't think we have any travel plans for the rest of the year. Kind of unpredictable with my job when shoot's going to come in and what's going to happen, but we'll see. We'll see. Fingers. We'll definitely do another trip at some point this year, I think. Just not sure where yet.
Well, I mean, even 3, even if they're not necessarily super far away, it's still not bad. Right now, I have none, so working on the ones. So
get to New Zealand, man. You got to do it.
Yeah, I plan to. So this Chris has been absolutely fantastic. I will give you that last chance if anything popped into your head before we wrap the show.
I really wish I had a funny story to tell you. I'm sure there is. I mean, it's going to be one of those things, like, as soon as I hit, like, all right, we're done, I'll be like, oh, I've got it. No, it's fine.
Yeah. I think we should probably do this again if you're up for it, maybe sometime down the road, maybe later this year once you've done some more travels, and we can talk about recent stuff and maybe touch on some more of your work, because I just think that was so fascinating. So
yeah, absolutely. Love to. Sounds good.
Yeah. So any final words or thoughts, not story related necessarily, that you'd like to add?
I mean, again, travel is a privilege. And I know not everyone gets to travel for financial reasons or whatever, but it's one of the things that I think everybody should do. And you could just travel within your own country or whatever, or nearby. You don't have to go on big expensive trips, but just the act of traveling, meeting new people, seeing new perspectives, I think that's one of the most important things you could do as a human being. It just shows you that there are so many different people out there. Like, your perspective might not be the right one always. And I just think it's a healthy thing to do as a human being. So I always encourage anyone that can travel, just do it. It's so good for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I agree with you as well. And hopefully this does, if it doesn't just entertain people, hopefully it does maybe inspire a few people to just get out there and just try it. Just go do something. Just travel a couple hours away, even just to explore a town that's near you.
100%.
Just start somewhere. Yeah. So
there's something core about human evolution, like exploring outside the cave, finding new things. Like, there's something core in our DNA about travel. So I think, you've got to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Chris, this has been fantastic. Thank you for taking so much time with me.
No worries.
Your day's kind of getting started. Mine's pretty much winding down, but this has been excellent. And I hope people will follow what you're doing and check out the different links that I'll put in the show notes. I know I will be, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
All right. Thanks.
And there's another episode of the Where Have You Been podcast in the books. Thank you so much for listening today. It was another great guest with some great stories, as always, and I hope that you will support all of the guests by checking out the show notes and going to their web pages, seeing any socials and projects that they may have going on. And please, again, I'll ask as always to like, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really does help to allow the podcast to grow and reach more people, and I appreciate you for doing that. Also, if you haven't done so, check out the website, whybpodcast.com, where you can find blog posts. If you'd like to be a guest, please register to be a guest on the site, and check out the merch page. There's some really cool stuff if you're interested in representing the pod, along with some other cool travel items and apparel that I'm working on every day as well. Join me again next week for another great guest with more incredible stories. New episodes drop every Sunday just after midnight Eastern Time. Until then, thank you for being here, and have a great day.